For that matter, this total security of our online transactions rests on the assumption that the factoring integers of 1,000 digits or more digits is going to be a prohibitive. It's one cannot factor in the real time when the number has got 100 or more digits, when that is expressed in terms of decimal notation. But that is very hard. This particular thing is challenged by Peter Shor, and who proposed some polynomial time algorithm to go through this factoring problem. All the algorithms which are available in order to factor such an integer n, as of now, are algorithms which run on exponential time. But Peter Shor proposes a polynomial time algorithm for factoring an integer n greater than 1. So this is a typical challenge which is taken up by Peter Shor. And we should try to look into the complexity involved in solving this problem. So what are the time complexities which are involved in this one? Suppose that an integer n with d decimal digits is to be factored. Is to be factored. Suppose this is to be factored. Then we have got several algorithms to address this problem. The brute force algorithm, if you apply that brute force algorithm, what does it do? This particular brute force algorithm is going to go through all the primes p up to square root of n and checks whether this p is going to divide n or not. But remember, this is very tough job. For smaller numbers, this may not be a big thing, but for bigger numbers, we have to go through all primes available up to root n. That itself is a problem of finding primes. So finding primes up to a given integer in itself is a big problem, even though that Eratosthenes sieve gives us a method when the number is very small. But finding primes up to root n itself is a big problem. And checking for its the divisibility of n by this particular prime is again very tough. So in the worst case, it is going to take runtime roughly about square root of n. That may look very simple, but it is not that simple, because before looking at this particular brute force algorithm, one must know all the primes p up to square root of n. That itself is a very big problem. So it's a crude method for that matter. But there is another factoring method called quadratic sieve method. There are some interesting effective sieve methods, but all of them are going to take very big lengthy procedures. So another method of factoring this one is quadratic sieve method. Quadratic sieve method. What does it do? Yeah, this particular method is something we will have to construct integers a and b. One must construct integers a and b such that the some difference of squares of these two is a multiple of n for some integer k. For some integer k. So for some integer k, you have to find out this difference of squares of a and b to be a multiple of n. Once you find these, you check the GCD of a minus b comma n and GCD of a plus b comma n. If they have a common factor, if either this is greater than 1 or this is greater than 1, then we are done. We are done. Why? So there is the GCD of a minus b comma n is bigger than 1. That is going to divide n so that a factor of n has been obtained. enough. Even the GCD of a plus b comma n bigger than 1, even then you can get this done. That's okay. So, but then a question comes in. What choice of integers a and b are to be made? How about the finding such a and b's? And for which this a square minus b square is going to become a multiple of n. This itself is a big thing. In other words, you must choose some appropriate case so that that multiple must be the difference of squares of two numbers. But either way is a tough job, and some judicious choice has to be made while finding a and b's are first and or k first. But both of them are going to involve some methods of finding these a and b's and k appropriately. Remember, even this is also not that easy. This is also not that easy, even though this is an improvement over the previous brute force method. But even this is going to consume, this method is going to consume a lot of time. This method, if it works, if we are successful in producing such A and Bs, it's going to consume this runtime of this runtime of an exponential in square root of t. All these are asymptotic estimates, please. But this is one typical method, but there are some difficulties in this method. One must be successful in producing A and B's such that square of A minus square of B should be a multiple of n. But there is another efficient method of factoring this. That is in fact a powerful method which is available till date, namely general number field C. There is another method of factoring, general number field C. This is another method using which you can try to look at the problem of factoring this one, but this is going to take a runtime about an exponential in cube root of d. Yeah, all these are in fact exponential time algorithms. So these methods are using algorithms of exponential time, right? But Peter Shor is interesting thing about Peter Shor's algorithm is that and the algorithm he proposed is going to use a polynomial time algorithm. Let us even try to understand what actually this means, taking so much of time to compute to address this problem of factoring. Let's try to look at a bit further what actually this means. Suppose if I take the number of decimal digits in that number is say 232. And this has been actually computed, that's why I'm quoting this example. So the algorithm mentioned in 4 mentioned above, of course, in that fourth step, is going to use order e to the power of k cubed root of d log d to the power of 2 by 3. Whereas Shor's algorithm is going to take consumes order k d cube, which is much superior to the previous one, which is much faster than the method mentioned in 4. Remember, when this number n with the 232 digits is tried for its factorization by using that classical factoring algorithm, when the number and the number, of course, then not the n, let me call a number, that number I'm not able to mention here, a number n with 232 digits
Excuse
is
me, sir.
factored, please.
Sir, there's a query that D represent the number of digits.
Number of digits only. Number
Okay,
of
sir.
digits only, right? That's what I will
Okay,
tell
sir.
you. Okay. So when a number n with the 230 digits is factored by using a classical factoring algorithm mentioned in 4, of course, mentioned in 4, used 2000 CPU years. 2000 CPU years is roughly nothing but this is in fact nothing but 31536 trillion operations. You can imagine the operations are required by a computer. Yeah, let me make it more clear about this number, what actually this means. First of all, one CPU year is nothing but one CPU year. This is nothing but 1 G hour. 1 G hour of operations done. 1 G hour is nothing but the measure of computer work done. The measure of computer work done, or work done on a computer, done by 1 G flop machine in an hour. Yeah, we shall even try to understand what actually this means. This means that it is equal to 3.6 trillion operations summoned so much of this one. This is nothing but a massive amount of operations to be done. What is 1 G flop? This 1 G flop machine operations is nothing but a machine. This will do a billion operations per second. Billion operations per second. Now you can go on estimating this, how much amount of work is to be done, even to factor a number with so many digits, 232 digits. Therefore, this classical algorithms are going to become almost impractical when you are dealing with large numbers while factoring this one. But whereas the same problem can be addressed by Shor's algorithm, which is going to take order k d cube, this one. Of course, I could not estimate this one exactly, but it's going to be much smaller than this amount of time, or is going to be much smaller compared to this one. This is in the exponential order and this is in the polynomial order. So this Shor's algorithm is going to give you a polynomial time algorithm, which is much going to be faster than over an algorithm which is going to consume exponential time, right? So that's why it's going to, this algorithm is going to run even on classical computers as well. It is not that Shor's algorithm is confined to only classical computer that we are using today. But what makes all this to happen? That is a question, right? And before entering into this particular Shor's algorithm, let's try to look into heart and soul of this algorithm. What actually is going to happen in this Shor's algorithm? No, we shall look into that part. We shall come to the main topic. Shor's algorithm. What is the heart of this problem? To be frank, from the number theory point of view, it is in fact a very simple problem. The problem is nothing but you are given a number n which is a product of two primes and whose factors are to be found. That is the problem. What is the problem? The problem is this, which we address by using this to factor n, which is a product of two primes, which is a product of two primes, P and Q, which are very large. When the numbers are very small, nothing that we can, it's going to be very easy problem. Large in the sense, not that having 10 digits or 15 digits, large in the computer science sense or in the computing sense, having hundreds of digits. So when this number is to be factored, the method that Shor adopts is this one. What does he do is, in the first step, he chooses something like this. The first step, what does he do is, pick up an integer a from the set 2, 3, 5, and so on, capital N minus 1. From these n minus 2 numbers, pick up an integer a, which is co-prime to n, which is co-prime to this capital N. That is, what is the meaning of this? GCD of this a comma n should be equal to 1. You choose one such. You choose one such a. Then with this a, I'm going to do so many wonderful things. And second step, what we have to do is, the second step, we have to find the order of this a. We have to find the order of a. It has got another name also, or period of a. I think this period of a is mostly preferred, but from the mathematical point of view, calling order of a is right thing. Order of a, of course, modulo n. We have to find this. What is this? It is nothing but, what is order? It is to find the smallest integer r such that e to the power of r is congruent to 1 modulo n. So this r is called order of a. But this algorithm does not give you a specific method of computing this r, but he makes some trials using this. You may be successful in producing this r. That is fine. I'm not saying that you're always sure of getting this r, but certainly in most of the situations, with the high probability, we can certainly find this. We can find this. Its probability to find this r by using Shor's algorithm is very high. It's very high. It's very close to 1. The probability of finding this r. Therefore, that what I do is, once such a typical, or my question is that, okay, the Shor's algorithm is going to give you a typical search method to go for this r. Sometimes we may not be that successful, but that's very rare. But mathematically speaking, one can find this r certainly by Euler's theorem. What does Euler's theorem say? One can find this r. One can find such r, of course, by using Euler's theorem. Euler's theorem, which states that if GCD of a comma n is equal to 1, then we have this one. e to the power of phi n is congruent to 1 modulo n. In fact, this r is going to be a factor of phi n, going to be a factor of phi n. So therefore, r is guaranteed, but the question is how to find this. R definitely exists. The problem is how to find this r. So this total algorithm is going to depend on this r. One who is successful in getting this r, the problem factorization is going to come to an end. Now the question is this: how to find this? So what is this r now? This r is nothing but less than or equal to phi n, or in fact r is a divisor of this phi of n, phi of Kaplan, sorry, phi of Kaplan. But okay, this is okay, right? But how to find this r is important. Such a r definitely exists. How to find this one? But I'm not going to give you any clue for that. But instead, what I do is in the Schultz algorithm, he makes out such assumptions. If we are fortunate enough, if fortunately R is found to be even by some means, it will be a good news for us. It will be a good news for us. Why? The reason is this. What I do is, suppose this good news never happens with us, then you have to change other year. Or else, if this doesn't happen, then choose another A, or try with that A. So this such should continue till you get order of A to be an even number. With that, it will not be over. I won't even look into another point also, namely this fourth point. Suppose that you have got R is in. If R is even, how is that it is going to give us a good news for us? It's something like this. If R is even, consider X such that A to the power of R by 2 is congruent to X modulo n. You consider this X. Further, if it so happens that, namely, X plus 1 is not a multiple of n, if it is not a multiple of n, then the factorization of n will come to an end. How will this come to an end? Very simple. In this case, what happens is, in this case, the factors P comma Q, the factors of n are contained in the set of these two numbers. Which two numbers? GCD of x plus 1 comma n and GCD of x minus 1 comma n. So in other words, what is it you have to do? If it so happens that R is even and a to the power of R by 2 is congruent to x modulo n, you pick up this x, add to 1. If that is not a multiple of n, your job is over. What is it you observe? You just take GCD of x plus 1 comma n, and GCD of x minus 1 comma n. And in fact, these are going to give you the factors of n. But then, so total problem of factoring capital N, which is given to be a product of two primes. Of course, P and Qs are unknown, only n is given to you. So in the total process of this factoring problem, remember, these are hidden. These are hidden pages. Our job is to find out P and Qs, right? Only n will be given to you. Only this n will be given to you. And we have to find out P and Qs. We have to reveal these two factors. Okay, what is it you are doing in the process, in the source algorithm? You have to pick up an integer a from the list of integers 2, 3, 5, n minus 1, which are n minus 2 in number. And that number which is co-prime to n. For this a, you have to find its order. Order is nothing but the smallest positive integer r, so that e to the power 4 is congruent to 1 modulo n. Right? Is congruent to 1 modulo n. But such a typical order does exist by Euler's theorem. What does Euler's theorem say? If a is co-prime to n, e to the power phi n is congruent to 1 modulo n, where this phi n is Euler's phi function, please. What is this phi n? It is Euler's phi function, which counts the number of integers up to n that are relatively prime to n. Here it should be small n, capital N, please. This is in fact capital N. So this is in fact, this particular property is there by the Euler's theorem, but our R is going to be a divisor of this phi. So whatever that may be, theoretically this R is going to exist. But how to pick up this one? He makes out an observation. Sure makes out an observation. What is that observation? If we are able to find out this R of A, which is considered to be period of A or order of A, is even, I think we'll be fortunate enough to go for the factorization. Or else, what is that you have to do? You have to choose another A and try on similar lines. Okay. If R is even, I suppose no such R even turns out to be there, then nothing to worry. This method will not work. So if R is even, consider x, which is nothing but a power r by 2 congruent to x modulo n. But when it so happens that x plus 1 is not a multiple of n, then factorization problem will come to an end. In that case, the factors p and q are going to be contained in the set containing two elements, GCD x plus 1 comma n, GCD x minus 1 comma n, modulo n, of course, modulo n. Once you find out this set, the factors are going to be contained in that. So let me explain this with an example, how to look at this example. So we shall find out what actually is going to happen in this examples. So let us consider this. These examples are very, very trivial examples from the computational points of view. Only in order to explain the method, I am taking these examples. But manually, these are also not that easy. But from the computation's point of view, they are very trivial examples. Let us take this one. Let's take the integer n is equal to 77. Beforehand, we know that its factors are 7 and 11, right? We shall get these factors by using the above method. Okay. So what is that method? We shall choose some integer a, which is relatively prime to 77. So I want to choose this. Choose a is equal to 18. Can you choose? You can choose any number for that matter, your choice. I have taken a to be 18. What is GCD of 18 comma 77? They do not have any common factors, therefore this one. You can see this. So I can choose my a to be 18. Then what is it you have to do? You have to find out the order of this one. You look at this one. What is phi of n? Euler's phi function. It's going to be 5 of 77. I am not supposed to do this because we have to find out factors of this. 577 is 7 into 11. Actually, it should be equal to 6 into 10. It is 60. Actually, because number is small, very small, I am able to compute this fine. What is your R, which is order this A modulo n, this R is a divisor of 60. In fact, you can see that this order of 18 modulo 77 is in fact 30. You can check this. Remember, I'm not, what is that you have to go on doing it? You go on taking various powers. 18 power 1 is counted to 1 modulo 77. 18 squared, 324 modulo something. Like that go on. 30 is going to be the first integer with which 18 power 30 is going to be congruent to that particular 1 modulo 77. For this purpose, I would like to make use modular arithmetic calculator. The calculator is this. The calculator is this. I want to take this 77 as the number, and I have to take what the number that is to be chosen is this one. What is that I have to find out? Order of this, no? Let's just try to look at 1 8 to the power of 30 is going to be equal to 1. You can check 1 is here. And any number that you choose less than 30, this will not happen. If you choose any number less than 30, this will not happen, please. You can check that clearly, and you can go through number of such modular arithmetic operations to perform this. So to perform this. So let us agree to the fact that this order is 30. So this 30 is nothing but your small r, which is even, right? So then what is it you have to find? A to the power 4 by 2, which is equal to 18 to the power of 30 by 2, which is equal to 18 to the power of 15. This 18 to the power of 15 modulo 43 is to be found. Again, I want to make use the same calculator. It is going to give you 43 modulo 77. How I have done this? You can compute manually, or you can use that modular arithmetic calculator. Any one of them will do. So this is going to become 43. So this is my x now. Okay, that's what is mentioned in the theorem. This x is there. Look at this one. This x plus 1, which is equal to 43 plus 1, which is 44, is certainly not congruent to 0 modulo 77, right? So once this is not congruent to 0 modulo 77, then you have to look for what? GCD of x plus 1, comma this one. Compute, let us compute this one. Let's compute GCD of x plus 1 comma n. This is equal to GCD of x plus 1 is 44, n is 77. What is GCD of these two? It is 11. And what is GCD of x minus 1 comma n? It is equal to GCD of 42 comma 77. GCD of this number is 7 is the common factor. So note that 7 comma 11 are factors of 77. Okay, remember, so what is involved in this one? You have to choose some a cleverly, and whose order should be even. When that happens to be even, take a to the power 4 by 2. Take a to the power 4 by 2. If it is congruent to x modulo of 77 such that expression is not congruent to 0 modulo this, then you are successful in getting the factors. What is it you have to do? Compute GCD of x plus 1 comma n and GCD of x minus 1 comma n. And they are going to give you the factors of that number. You can try with another example also. You can choose another example to illustrate this. If I take the number to be, say, this This is done in the textbook, but with a different A. They have chosen A to be 7, but I have chosen A to be 8 here. Chosen A to be, say, 8 instead of 7, which is there in the textbook. You can see that order of or period, order of 8 is 4. You can compute this one directly because the number is very small. What is 8 to the power of 1 is congruent to 8 modulo 15. What is 8 square is congruent to 64 is congruent to 4 modulo 15. What is 8 cube? 8 cube is congruent to 4 into 8, which is 32, which is congruent to 2 modulo 15. What is 8 power 4? 8 power 4 is 2 into 8, which is congruent to 16, congruent to 1 modulo 15, right? Therefore, what can you say about order of this 8 is equal to 4. This is our R, which is even, right? So here also we are successful in getting order of this element to be even. Then what is it you have to compute? So let us compute this one. A to the power of R by 2, which is equal to 8 to the power of 4 by 2, which is equal to 8 square, which is 16, which is congruent to 64, sorry. It is in fact 64, which is congruent to 4 modulo 15, right? So this is our x, right? Now if I take this x plus 1, what is x plus 1? 4 plus 1, which is equal to 5, is certainly not congruent to 0 modulo 15. So therefore now we are fortunate enough that the factors of 15 are contained in this one. Thus, the factors of 15 are contained in this set. What is that? GCD of x plus 1 comma n, GCD of x minus 1 comma n. But this is nothing but x plus 1 is nothing but 5 comma n is 15. X minus 1 is nothing but 4 minus 1, 3 comma 15. What are these factors? One is 5, the other. In fact, these are the factors of 3 comma 5 or factors of 15. Thus we have done. But remember, if you look at this algorithm, there are so many problems within itself, right? What are the problems which are apparent in this algorithm? If you look at the problem here, first of all, in order to factor this n is equal to pq, in order to factor this n, which is a product of two large primes, remember, we have to find out some judicious a whose order modulo n becomes even, such that that e to the power 4 by 2 count x modulo is such that x plus 1 is not a multiple of n. Then you are successful in getting factors of n through the set GCD x plus 1 comma n and GCD x minus 1 comma n. Done. Very good. So one thing is sure that factoring n is now reduced to finding out a typical A and its order. So factoring problem is now being reduced to what? It is reduced to finding out order of a particular A. But this problem itself is a tough problem, even from the mathematics point of view, even from the quantum computing point of view also. Let us see what is going to happen in the quantum computing context. What actually this is going to give us. If I keep this one aside for a while. If I look into the same problem from the context of the quantum computing, what does this give us? Let us try to look at that problem. So this Shor's algorithm, which is in fact a powerful computing algorithm for factoring an integer n, is very much going to run on classical computers also. So therefore, in order to apply this Shor's algorithm, one needs to find the order or period of A modulo n. This is what we have observed, right? Problem is reduced to finding this period or order. But finding a period of A can be done using this one. Finding order of A can be done by using this quantum phase estimation. Quantum phase estimation. Don't worry about these big terms. When you look at them mathematically, they're very simple ideas, nothing to worry. But while going through this, finding order of A has got something to do with the quantum phase estimation of some states in the quantum computing. But while going through the quantum phase estimation, one has to go through quantum Fourier transforms. And the quantum Fourier transform is in fact key to this, let me call for short QPE. So to this QPE. So spoken differently, what has been now done? We could see that order that factoring reduces to find out order of A. Order of A, finding order of A has got something to do with the quantum phase estimation, QPE. And QPE can be handled through quantum Fourier transform. Remember, most of the times, transformations are going to play a dominant role in solving problems in various sciences, for that matter. For instance, if you take Laplace transforms, what do? Some problem will be transformed to some other problem, and that inverse of Laplace transform will be applied to that, and we get back to the solution of the problem. So in order to solve a particular problem, what we do is we apply some kind of transformation. The transformation may be a series, the transformation may be some through integration, this transformation may be through some differentiation. It can be any kind of transformation. We'll be transforming some problem into some other problem through some appropriate transformation. That transformation may be Fourier transformation, that may be Laplace transformation, that may be any other series kind of transformations, or that may be a Z transform, that may be any other kind of transformation. That problem will be transformed to another problem. And that problem, which is transformed via this transformation, becomes quite easy to solve. And that will be solved and for the solution of original problem. So original problem will be translated to another problem using some transformation. That problem, when gets transformed to some other problem, that problem can be handled very easily. So spoken differently, in any branch of science, in particular in mathematics, when the transformations are going to come into picture while solving some problems, one must feel very happy. That particular transformation is going to make our job very easy in finding out solution of the original problem by converting that problem into an easier one. Here also, what we do is some states will be converted to some other states by using this quantum Fourier transform, and that can be handled very easily to the original problem of finding this kind of things, namely uh, order finding or a period finding problem reduces to go through some appropriate quantum phase estimation problem algorithm, and that in turn has got something to do with the quantum Fourier transform. And what actually is going to happen in this process? Let me just try to explain. Abstractly, I cannot go through the concrete problem as I have done in the case of number theory, because this uses almost 7 to 18 chapters total summary in order to address that problem. So unless the readers are quite familiar with all the topics that are covered in this quantum computation or quantum computing, so solving a problem concretely is not that easy. That itself is going to take at least 4 to 5 hours to take a small problem and to arrive at the answer, something like that. So taking an integer n, which is equal to 15, and by using this quantum computing techniques, that takes a lot of time, not less than 4 to 5 hours, with the detailed illustrations. That too, if you have got total summary of the topics covered at that particular stage thoroughly in your mind, I cannot make you to understand that one, but it's very easy, don't worry. So this particular topic comes at after 7 or 8 chapters, which form a foundation for these algorithms. So this turns out to be a full-length semester course, which is to be taught to the readers, unless they understand all of them and they are thorough with the problems. We cannot understand this one that easily, but certainly when you put some effort on these aspects, you can do it very easily. What actually is done in this one? Let me just explain through steps. So the steps that are involved in this process are something like this. The point is this one. If n and a, please, any questions, please? Any queries, please?
Hello, sir?
Please. Do you have any queries, please?
No, sir, we don't have queries in the chat box.
So if
Participants, does anyone want to have a question directly with sir? We don't have anything in the chat box.
Okay. So let me continue. If n and a are co-prime integers, then we know that just now we have seen. We know that the period of a modulo n is nothing but the smallest r such that a power r congruent to 1 modulo n. This we know. For example, if I take a is equal to 7, as was done earlier, n is equal to 15, this order of a is going to be equal to 7. You can check this. Leave about that. This shows algorithm exploits interference to measure periodicity of arithmetic objects. Periodicity of arithmetic objects like this here. Arithmetic objects. Yeah, don't worry. A little bit of physics is required at this stage. How this interference can be measured for finding periodicity of some arithmetical functions given like for the a modulo n. We have found that particular order of a how to find out this by using this interference. For that, what you do is, in order to find this R, in order to find R, we construct, we need to construct a unitary operator appropriately. UA. What is unit operator? Its conjugate transpose of UA should be equal to its inverse. And operators can be translated into the language of matrices, please. Any operator on a Hilbert space will have a unique matrix representation. For that any matrix representation within the Hilbert space will have a particular operator. Operators can be translated or can be spoken in the language of matrices. So when you choose this appropriate unitary operator UA, unit operator is nothing but its inverse is nothing but its conjugate transpose. So you need to compute this one, which is going to implement this one, that implements multiplication modulo n, which implements modular multiplication function. Modular multiplication function. That is each x will be computed to a times x modulo n. So to compute such things, we need that particular UA. So in other words, the problem of finding order of A is now reduced to what? Problem of finding some appropriate unitary operator UA, right? But having done this UA, I need to go through the next one, namely, you have to find out eigenvalues of this UA. They are closely related to the period of A by some connection. Eigenvalues of this UA, eigenvalues of this UA are closely related to the period of A. In fact, the eigenvalues of UA are of the form. These are complex numbers only, the form e to the power of j phi, where this phi is equal to, it has got nothing to do with the Euler's phi function, please, or for some integer k. For some, they are so close, they are related to this one. So finding eigenvalues of these UA are going to give you this R pattern, but there is a problem in finding these eigenvalues. So the problem of finding a period A reduced to what? Problem of finding eigenvalues of UA, right? Now, finding R reduced to what? Finding eigenvalues of UA, right? Eigenvalues of UA. Now, the problem ultimately reduces to what? In order to find out that particular order of A, which is going to factor n, is reduced to find out UA and its eigenvalues. So problem of factoring reduced to what? Problem of finding eigenvalues of some appropriate unitary operator, right? But then finding this particular eigenvalues is not that easy. So in order to find out these eigenvalues of the unitary operator A, so those things can be measured effectively by using this quantum phase estimation algorithm. That is this one. So therefore, the eigenvalues of UA. Remember, we are doing all this for very, very large numbers, please. When you are dealing with very small numbers, they become very, very small. So the eigenvalues of this UA can be measured I'm not saying that it can be found directly, it can be measured effectively using quantum phase estimation. But in fact, for that matter, getting this R from the measured eigenvalues of UA is possible only when the exact eigenvalues are found, please. But with an exponentially very small precision, we can go through very close approximation to these eigenvalues. Thereby, you can try to find out R so close. So this particular R can be found from these eigenvalues of UA when they are found exactly. But you may not be in a position to find out exact eigenvalues of this UA by using QPE. But for some exponential precision, by this very high precision, by using QPE, you're going to go to the eigenvalues of this UA, and thereby you can get the value very closer to that small r. Thereby you can guess what that natural number R is, which stands for the order of the element A. Now, that's one thing. But then, of course, remember that here, eigenvalues of UA can be measured by using QPE approximately to the precision of some exponentially small one. To the exponentially small precision, you can get the eigenvalues of UA very closely by using this QPE. But in order to imply this QPE, one needs to go through that QFT. So these particular eigenvalues can be estimated by using this QPE to a family of unitary operators. We estimate the eigenvalues of UA by QPE algorithm to, of course, I can estimate the eigenvalues of this one by using this, by applying QPE, to this one. QPE to the operators, U suffix B, where this B are nothing but special powers of A square, A power 2 power 2, A power 2 power 3. You have to compute till A power 2 power j, where this B is equal to A power 2 power j, and 2 power j should be very close to n. We stop with this. We stop with this UB. Now, what happens at this stage? At this stage, it so happens that we will be stopping at this A power 2 power j until UA 2 power, that's UA 2 power j, where this 2 power j is very close to n. At this stage, we stop and we try to find out eigenvalues by using QPE for this particular U 2 power j. But how to find out that another problem finding eigenvalues of UA is translated. You'll be starting with this UA, and you have to compute UA 2 power j, where this 2 power j is close to n. So finding eigenvalues of this one is reduced to what? Finding eigenvalues of this one by using QPE. This is what we are trying to do, right? But a question now comes in. With this UA, how to find this UA 2 power j? How are they connected, their eigenvalues? It's very simple, please. If you look at this UB, say U A 2 power j, or it's nothing but ua whole to the power of 2 power j. So therefore, the eigenvalues of ua reveal the eigenvalues of ub, and eigenvalues of ub is, that is therefore through the eigenvalues of ub, one can find the eigenvalues of ua. So therefore, problem of finding eigenvalues of this ua by using QPA reduced to what? Finding eigenvalues of this one. But remember, in order to find out this eigenvalues of QA, now reduced to what? Finding these UBs. But finding UBs, is it that easy? I said that is very easy. What is that you have to do is you have to go on, first of all, computing. Here one needs to compute. One needs to compute what? One needs to compute a square, a power 2 power 2, and so on. But this can be achieved easily, but these moduli, of course, these are to be found. But these powers can be computed. These powers can be computed easily by using another algorithm, by using square and multiply algorithm. Square and multiply algorithm. So this is going to help us in finding these disks. Not, but for this, in other words, what is it being done in the Shor's algorithm? In the Shor's algorithm, what we have done is, in order to find out order of A, we need to find out some appropriate unitary operator UA, whose eigenvalues are going to be very, estimation of those eigenvalues are going to give you an estimation for R closely. But those eigenvalues can be found by using quantum phase estimation. But quantum phase estimation has got something to do with quantum Fourier transform of some quantum states. And point is that the problem now totally reduced to this one. So Shor's algorithm, if you look at this one, reduces to what? Order finding problem. Order finding can be done by using this U suffix A. And the U suffix A and this U is eigenvalues problem. This problem can be done by using quantum phase estimation. But this has got something to do with what? Quantum Fourier transform, right? But particularly this one is not that easy, of course. By even though this procedure looks very, very lengthy and tough, point is that the amount of running time to run this algorithm is going to be a polynomial time algorithm compared to classical factoring algorithms there in the classical computers, which are exponential time algorithms. Compared to that, this is very, very fast algorithm. When these quantum computers become more practical and come into the hands of the users, whatever the systems that you consider today, which are quite secure by using this RSA crypto system or elliptic cryptography systems, they become very, very, very simple crypto systems, and they can be broken pretty easily. So therefore, I think quantum computers are going to revolutionize the total computing business and the information processing business to the next level with no comparison to any kind of these things. It's going to be totally different paradigm shift altogether once these quantum computers are going to come into the world. If they are going to be in practice, or if they are going to become reality in the near future, and they are going to make out revolutions like anything. So probably we may have to write the human history uh, before quantum computing and after quantum computing. So revolutions are going to take place very shortly once these computers come into our hands. Our days are not far ahead. In fact, they are very close, where we are going to witness these computers. This is what I wanted to convey. But even to make this particular problem so clearly, concretely by using these quantum computing, that needs 4 to 5 hours of teaching, thorough teaching, with of course background in all the topics that are taught earlier. My sincere request to you is that I have got some books with me. Let me show you. You can go to them leisurely, page by page, so that you can understand nicely. The best book I recommend is that Quantum Computing Explained, David Mahan. That's one book. Apart from that, I would like to show you some more books which are helpful to you. The books that I want to refer is these are the books. This is the classic textbook, Quantum Computation and Quantum Information by Michael Nielsen and Chong. I think this is one of the prescribed textbooks for this syllabus. It's a wonderful book. And another book is Mathematical Aspects of Quantum Computing. In fact, it is the resultant of a particular workshop held in Japan somewhere during 2017, wherein you can see beautiful lectures delivered by experts in the field. This also you can refer. Mathematical Aspects of Quantum Computing is one. A typical compilation of lectures delivered at that particular workshop in the Japan. And this is another beautiful textbook which one can refer. An introduction to quantum computing by these Laflamme and Mosca. This is wonderful book. One can refer. So another book is this is what I was talking about. It's a wonderful textbook which has got beautiful illustrations. So anybody with almost very basic knowledge in linear algebra can understand this subject to a greater extent, to a greater depth, line by line, page by page. Once one goes through this book, one can understand pretty easily this quantum computing and information. Quantum Computing Explained. This book is not available in the Indian printing. It's only international edition is available for this. This one book. And apart from this, I
1 minute, sir.
request the
I
readers.
request,
Please.
sir, I request all the
Please.
participants to take a screenshot of the books, sir. Can you go back to that page so they can
Yeah.
take a screenshot because we are not writing in a
Yeah.
chat box. Whenever, yeah, they can
Yes.
take a screenshot, Control P, or whichever option is available with you. With the free phone also you
So,
can take, and then, sir, it is easy for them to refer, sir. That's why. Thank you, sir.
yeah, no, this screen is visible clearly.
Yes, yes, it's clear, sir.
Yeah. So the 5 books I'm mentioning, and all these 5 books are very, very beautiful books. One can read without any knowledge, but for linear algebra, which is essential course in the engineering curriculum. So it will not be any problem for anybody to follow these. Okay. Not
Thank
only that, I refer one important website maintained by IBM, and you are, I think this might be spoken by earlier speakers. Qiskit. It's an open source quantum software development toolkit. Or you can find all the details in this one. This is the page I'm trying to show you. Qiskit.org, wherein you can see total stuff related to quantum computing, programs, how to execute them, total text, all concepts and illustrations, algorithms, their programming codes and how to run them. All those things are there, but one needs to have some little bit of familiarity with the Python programming. And most of the programs which are there in the quantum computing can be run on classical computers, and one needs only a little bit of familiarity with the Python programming, but for that nothing is there. So this contains lots of stuff in this. Right, total quantum computing can be learned by using this um, website. Right, this is what I wanted to show you in this present lecture. Only I could explain the mathematical aspects of this Schwarz algorithm, not pure from the point of quantum computing thoroughly. And with these few, I would like to conclude. And before taking leave, I want to listen to the readers. If they have got any questions, they can pose to me. And I will try to answer them. Madam.
Yes, sir. I request participants to come ahead with their questions. We can have, sir, we have, I think, yes, there is one question.
Mhm.
Sir, can you
Yeah,
also
please.
recommend a book which explains how these algorithms are polynomial in time? I'm finding it difficult to understand what makes an algorithm be executed in polynomial time.
Uh, right. Remember, yeah, one must be what actually means by saying that running time, even to get some work done by a computer, what is that you have to do? You have to pose your problem to the computer that can be understood by the computer, right? And it is going to take some time to address your query, right? So therefore, if you pose a problem to the computer and you need to write some code for that problem, the codes are basically written by using algorithms. Algorithm is nothing but systematic procedure using which you can solve some problem. So more the powerful the algorithm, shorter the program to be written for the problem, quicker the computation process done by the computer to address your query. So therefore, it all depends on the algorithm. A particular problem can be done by using an algorithm which runs into several lines. Same problem can be done by using an algorithm which runs into very few lines. So lesser the lines in the algorithm, smaller the code for the algorithm to solve the problem, so that lesser the time taken by the computer. So in order to measure the computer time taken in that particular processing the problem, that running time taken by the computer to solve that is measured in terms of these notations, order something, order fn, etc. Mostly, suppose some problem, which is any problem will be converted to what? A string of bits. So therefore, that particular thing is to be processed. The lengthier the bit, greater the time taken by the computer to process it, right? So having computed the total problem in terms of bits, the number of bits is going to play a dominant role. If the number of bits happen to be, say, n, number of bits to be processed by a computer, number which is to be processed by a computer which has got so n bits in the classical computer. In terms of this particular n, the people measure the time taken by the computer to solve this problem in terms of this notations, order fn's. If this fn is nothing but e to the power of something gn, we say that this algorithm is an exponential time algorithm. If this particular thing is a polynomial, Pn is a polynomial, we say that the algorithm which uses such a running time, order a polynomial in n, we say that it's a polynomial time algorithm. This Pn with the increasing n's is going to be very smaller compared to this e power gn's. So therefore, the algorithms that are run on exponential time algorithm are going to consume much time compared to uh, the problem solved by using polynomial time algorithms. But even how is that they have arrived at this source algorithm can be done order some n cube operations or running time. That itself is going to be a big theorem, whose proof will be very small by using mathematics. So that part is not necessary for us. A problem which can be solved by using polynomial time algorithm considered to be very easy compared to a problem which can be solved by using exponential time algorithm. So the problem, which is RSA problem, RSA solving factoring problem in the classical computer is done by an algorithm which is an exponential time algorithm, contrary to the same problem done by Shor's algorithm, which is going to take polynomial time. So therefore, certainly this is going to be an improvement over the earlier algorithm. When these things become practical, certainly it's going to make revolution in the information processing and computing. These are going to rise to the next level, that you can something like moving from candles to bulbs. There is no comparison. Totally a shift to that, right? Mm, Making a shift from candles to light is something entirely different. Technology is different, level is different. No, simply these are going to rise to next level once these computers come into hands. Have you got my point? I suppose I have explained enough about this.
Yes. Yes, sir. They you can even check the chats also, sir. Even I will read it for you. So
Mm.
according to him, so we are directly referring to the number of steps and operations that will be performed.
Ah,
Yes.
remember, every problem ultimately will be boiled down to numbers, numbers in decimals. That will be again converted to numbers in bits. That means to the base two. So that is the way computer understands it. So therefore, it all depends on the number of bits available in a string of bits, which is nothing but ultimate boiled down situation pertaining to some information processing, right? So more the number of bits, greater the time taken by the computer. Of course, it all depends on the powerful algorithms which are employed to solve that problem. So algorithms are to be there very powerful. Suppose somebody solves a problem today by using some algorithm, don't stop there. One can design a more powerful algorithm than that one, which is going to be more efficient in solving the same problem. So for a single problem, there can be several algorithms to solve it. The smaller the length in the algorithm, greater the efficiency of the processing, right? So therefore, we shall not stop. Suppose if one finds an algorithm to solve some problem, one should not stop there. One has to think about other algorithms which can solve the same problem more efficiently than the algorithms available. So I'm talking about all this particular stuff with the powerful algorithms still today available to factor integer. In terms of that only, I'm talking about all this particular stuff. Okay.
Any more questions from the participant side? Either you can ask directly or you can put in the chat box, whichever is comfortable with you. I request the participants to come ahead with their doubts. In the chat box, this is done, sir. We don't have any
Okay.
questions.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Yes,
Can I take leave?
yes, sir. I'll just extend my thanks to you, sir. 1 minute, give me a moment.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Sir, yes, sir.
Please.
Yes, you can stop your presentation, sir.
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
go ahead, sir. Yeah. On behalf of CBIT and the organizers of this FDP, I take this privilege of thanking sir for such a excellent and brilliant talk with such so many details. Sir, you have been in. I mean, you have taken a lot of efforts to go to the basic level of the algebra and make it to the higher level of quantum computing. Really, it was commendable job, sir. We have learned many things out of this lecture. Hope to hear many more things from you in the future, also, sir. The participants might have enriched their knowledge in this Shor's theorem, I mean, this algorithm with your explanation. Thank you, sir, once again. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Suresh, sir, shall we take a break now? We have another schedule. We have a next session to be started at 10:45 p.m. to 12:15 p.m. It will be hands-on by Dr. Y. Ramadevi ma'am and R. Shrikant sir. I request all the participants to take a break now and rejoin again at 10:45 for the second session of the day. Thank you, one and all.